Hi, I'm Robin Jeep, and this is the Big Picture Health Series. We're doing it at Suzanne's Natural Foods in the cafe. There's the garden out there. We were doing it out in the garden when it was warmer. And this one, this week, we're on number 5, and it's microbiome health. And that's what we're going to be covering. So as I was saying, we started off with the diet. This all pertains to everything. I mean, cancer and autoimmune diseases and all these things they're all related. I mean, because it has to do with your immune system's not working properly, basically. And so I call it the big picture health because there's a lot involved. And a lot of what you're going to hear, you won't hear in the medical industry because it's more of a pharmaceutical-oriented industry. And this is more about natural healing, but you can do a lot of these things with pharmaceuticals as well. So the first one we did was the dietary foundation, and the key is really a whole food plant-based diet, but you have to know what you're doing, and you have to know the proper supplements to take. So we covered that. Did I give you number 1? Did you get number 1? Okay. It should have, and there's some links there, and also I send emails out with videos and recipes and stuff. Then we went into GI health. That was the second week. And then we did outdoor living because being outdoors is very important because what's happening is we're not living according to our design, the way we were designed. We were designed to live outdoors, to have our hands in the earth, to be breathing the outdoor air, to be eating lots of plant foods, organic plant foods, getting exercise, and as I said, spending a lot of time outdoors, and most of us are not doing really any of those things, and therefore our bodies are not working properly. So then we did breath, joy, and water last week because most people don't breathe properly as well, and breath is extremely important, and we went over that. Have you done any of the five and a half breathing?
I did a lot to go to sleep at night, and all of them was trying to do that. So my thing is, the 5.5 going in, what do? You blow it out your nose?
It all goes in and out the nose.
Okay.
Nothing.
So 5 in and then 5 out.
Right.
Nose.
Yes.
That's what I wasn't sure about.
And then we talked about taping the mouth, and because this is very effective, just using for sensitive skin tape to tape your mouth so that you're forced to breathe through your nose. We are designed to breathe through our nose, but through the thousands of years and especially during the time of the industrialization, people started, it got even worse. Ancient man had much wider nasal passages, wider nose, bigger mouth. But with the advent of cooked foods and then processed foods, our mouths have gotten smaller and our nasal passages have gotten narrower. So we're not breathing properly. And not breathing properly means you're not getting oxygenated properly, so for your blood and so forth. And it's causing a lot of problems. So we went over that and we learned breathing techniques, and we learned about, I sleep every night, we both sleep every night with our mouths taped to force ourselves to sleep through the nose. And last night I had to tape his mouth because I can do a piece of tape like this and it'll keep my mouth closed and I won't do I won't try to breathe through my mouth, but he is bound and determined to breathe through his mouth. So if he leaves any corners of his mouth untaped, he will literally be able to blow out those corners of his mouth. So I had to tape him completely, his mouth completely. And it's really not claustrophobic. I thought it sounded crazy when I first heard about it, but you won't believe how much it helps you. It's really quite amazing. So we did breath, joy, and water. And this week we're doing microbiome health, which is almost, you'd think is kind of a repeat of the GI health, but it's not. And there's just so much involved in this. When I was writing this week about the microbiome health, I became very overwhelmed, felt overwhelmed because there was just so much. It's like, I wanted to tell everything, but I can't. So I just tried to pick sort of the highlights, and I will send you all some links to Zach Bush. Let's just go over first one, this one sheet right here. And Zach Bush is it's an endocrinologist, medical doctor, and he's triple board certified. He's also certified in endocrinology, internal medicine, and palliative care. He's a brilliant guy and a really brilliant thinker, and he's figured out a lot of things. Oh, I see him dragon fruit, beautiful. So I'm going to give you some key points to get started. Some of his key points, so that you have make sure you've got an understanding before we go into this other paper. So the gut is home to over 60% of the immune system. That is what protects you from cancer, among many other things, COVID and all that stuff. And the site of over 80% of antibody production in the body. And now everybody knows for sure what antibodies are, because you've heard all about antibodies with COVID. Okay, the gut produces over 90% of the serotonin in the human body. So serotonin is a chemical nerve cells. It's a chemical nerve cells produce. It sends signals between your nerve cells so they can communicate all through your nervous system. It is mostly found in the digestive system and in blood platelets and throughout the central nervous system. It's the chemical that helps with sleeping, eating, and digesting. When your serotonin levels are normal, you feel happier, calmer, more focused, less anxious, and emotionally stable. Serotonin also helps reduce depression, regulate anxiety, heal wounds, regulate nausea, maintain bone health, control bowel movement, control sleep and waking, regulate blood clotting, and sexual function. The peripheral nervous system, we're going to call it.
The serotonin, how do you know that you're getting enough of serotonin?
We're going to get into that. I just want you to have the background so you really understand what serotonin is, okay, when we go into this. So the peripheral nervous system, which is the PNS, interacts directly with the microbiome, which we're going to go into in here. The PNS consists of nerves that branch out from the brain and spinal cord. These nerves form the communication network between the central nervous system and body parts. The human immune system never intended to sterilize the human body. It does not fight bacteria, viruses, or otherwise. What it does is it helps keep everything balanced. Okay? The human brain and our emotions feed back on our microbial ecosystem and the functional capacity of our immune system. Reconnection to biodiversity at all levels of the human experience is our pathway to a regenerative health that has not yet been fully realized in the human experiment. Okay, so that reconnection to biodiversity at all levels of the human experience. That means biodiversity inside you, which we're going to get into in just a second. And that means biodiversity outside you. Not being isolated, like from COVID, this isolation keeps us from being around lots of different people. That's important for all of us. It's important because we share germs. We share all kinds of stuff that strengthens our immune systems, as well as on more of a spiritual level, you're sharing things. Outside, the biodiversity outside, the trees, the earth, the flowers, the plants, the insects, all this stuff. We're supposed to be surrounded by all of these things. Okay, so with serotonin, if you are not happy, if you're anxious, you're going to learn here what that does is that signals your nervous system to shut down or to slow down a lot of your important processes, like your immune system, like your digestive health, your heart, your liver, your different organs. Because when you go into a stress response, which can also be a fight, flight, or freeze response, you don't need to be, this part of your body, all these organs, and your brain, especially the frontal cortex of your brain where you do all your conscious thinking, all this stuff takes a lot of energy. But when you have to escape and get out of a dangerous situation, you can't afford that energy. You need that energy to go to your muscles and to your primitive brain back here to get you out of this situation. So, okay. So to get you out of this situation. And then once you get out of the situation, think of like a deer. You know, a predator comes, the deer reacts, runs, and gets away from the predator. Well, the deer doesn't just stay fretting over this predator that came after it. It goes back to grazing. And so then everything starts working again properly. Well, that's not what's happening to human beings. Okay, so let's go into this. So I'm going to talk about microbiome. It's made up of two words, micro, which means tiny, and biome, which means a large, naturally occurring community of flora and fauna occupying a major habitat. You are the habitat of your microbiome. Our gut's microbiome can weigh up to 4.5 pounds. And there are more bacteria in a gram of feces than people on the earth. That's just in that. So our microbiome is vital to every system in our body. So when something is wrong with our microbiome, something is wrong with us. And that can be cancer, that can be autoimmune, that can be heart disease, that can be diabetes. These are all chronic diseases. So what is the microbiome? Do you all know much about the microbiome? Well, you're going to learn today. Okay. The microbiome consists primarily of bacteria with fewer accompanying fungi and viruses, which all reside in our bodies and skin, and on our skin. Our GI tract, especially the colon, and here's the colon, here's the transverse colon, and here's the descending colon, and then it goes down to the rectum and out. So what happens is you chew your food, you swallow your food, it goes down your esophagus. Esophagus just carries it down. Then there's a little trap door, sphincter muscle here that drops, then it drops into your stomach. When your stomach goes like, it's like from here to here. Your stomach's pretty big. Your stomach can hold a quart. And so then the stomach, the muscles in the stomach work that food. Work it, break it down, work it, break it down. Then it drops from there. It drops now into your small intestine. Those are all those, a bunch of intestines that are in there. And that's where the magic really happens. That's where enzymes, your pancreas now releases enzymes. Your liver releases bile. Your gallbladder releases enzymes to break down fat. So it begins to break down that food, and it breaks it down into separate nutrients, and then those nutrients get absorbed in your small intestine. So when all that's finished, what's left is fiber and things that your body is unable to absorb. And that now goes into your large intestine. And in your large intestine, you have a lot of bacteria, fungi, and viruses. And the bacteria love what's left over. And it's going to be mostly plant foods because it's a lot of fibrous type stuff. They just love what's left over, and they eat it all up, and then your food is processed and comes out. So that bacteria, you need to feed that bacteria because that bacteria is very important to your immune system. And so we'll go on, and that just kind of gave you a picture of how it all moves through. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. Okay, so our GI tract, especially the colon, this is where I went off on this, houses friendly bacterial flora which dramatically affects our physical and mental health. Actually, we have trillions of bacteria and cells, trillions. But we have more bacteria and that bacteria's DNA than we have cells and our own DNA. You can see why it's so important that we are a good host to our trillions of life-supporting guests. So our physical bodies are made up of a community. Think about this. You have more bacteria. Your body is made up more of bacteria than it is of what you consider you. I mean, I've had to look at all of this stuff because the real you, I mean the you, is something that's, you know, your soul, or it's something we don't see. It's what's right now. You're looking at me. That the real you is looking at me somewhere, wherever it resides. Okay? The real you. And so, but your body that God made, this is how He made it. This is, I mean, science is really seeing a lot of stuff, and it is absolutely magnificent what we're learning about this human body that was created. Okay, so a healthy microbiome is vital to our health. So we all know now that this microbiome are the fungi, bacteria, and viruses that live in our body that make up most of us. Okay, so the health promoting effects of our good bacterial microbiome include a strong immune system, helping digestion and absorption, making vitamins, providing energy, breaking down toxins and medicines, producing cancer protective fatty acids and other essential compounds. All this stuff inside you, this is how God made us. He made us to have self-repairing bodies. That's
to protect us from cancer.
yes. So He made us to have self-repairing bodies. When you read the Bible, that was written during a time when people lived outdoors. They ate the plant foods mostly. Most of the Jewish people ate mostly plant foods. They couldn't afford meat. They had meat for their feast days. That's when they would have meat, and they ate dairy during the spring. But mostly they were living on tubers, legumes, wild greens, you know, the stuff that they could forage. And that was one of the reasons when Jesus was teaching these people, Jesus made comments, you know, why are you here to see me? Basically, you're here to get a meal because you've heard I can provide a meal. These people were starving. They were hungry. And so that was one of the reasons. I mean, and then they heard about the healing and so forth, and then he was a curiosity. But, you know, these were hungry people. And they had heard that food appears where Jesus is. Okay, so they also keep us from bloating and inhibit the growth of potential bad bacteria, fungus, or viruses. So it's a balance. So the good bacteria keep the bad bacteria out because they occupy space. Whoever occupies space wins. Okay?
So if you eat good vegetables, all that stuff, you won't have the bad bacteria. You won't get
Right,
sick.
but sometimes you need some help to get back there because you can be so messed up
Yeah, right.
that
And
it,
off of it. So
right.
doing it.
Okay, so should bad bacteria take hold, they can produce carcinogens, putrefy protein in our gut, produce toxins, impair our bowel function, and cause infections. When our microbiome works synergistically, meaning all together in symphony, and when in balance, everything goes well. The microbiome actually trains our immune system to protect us but not harm us, because autoimmune disease is where the immune system is attacking certain parts of the body. It's harming us because the immune system is powerful and it can do some damage. In our modern world, beginning at birth, there are a variety of things which can upset our microbiome balance. And I mean, it goes back into the womb. It goes back to conception. What was going on with mother when she conceived? What was going on with father when they came together? This stuff gets passed down through genetically, and it's called epigenetically, which means above genetics. So our environment has a great impact on this, and it gets passed down through the DNA. They call it in the Bible, also there's blessings and sins. Sins of the forefathers. We now call it epigenetics in science. Okay?
That's how you inherit, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, when they diagnosed her, when they think what she has, they looked into her and they looked at a DNA situation.
Yes.
And it is passed down. Her son has it,
Yes.
and she has it, but we don't know who else had it or where it originated. So started it.
And the way that can work is Our genes are affected by how we perceive the world. And there are people now, there's a lady that's doing it, it's called genogram, where you can go and start to look at your family history. And you can see, because trauma, you can inherit trauma that you didn't have, but that your great-grandfather had. And it got passed on down to you. But you know the way genes work, it might get passed on to you, but it didn't get passed on to your brother. But he got something else. So they're even where they can start tracking this, because trauma causes the immune system, compromises the immune system. So therefore it gets compromised. And then you've got genetic propensities that came down through the lineage, okay? And lifestyle and diet pull the trigger. So you can have that, like the BRCA gene for breast cancer. But if you live a healthy lifestyle and you eat, real plant-rich foods and organically and all that stuff, which a lot of people can't afford, unfortunately, you probably will not even manifest. It's not that you even overcome it, it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't manifest. But you can change things, like, I've even seen things where I have resolved things in myself and they got resolved in my adult daughter. So I can see that they even resolve, like it's the spiritual lineage, once it gets cut off in me, it gets cut off in her. I've watched this. So this is physical, spiritual, everything. Okay, so what we eat determines the bacteria we cultivate. So whatever you've been eating determines the bacteria that you have in your gut right now that's working. What we eat determines the type of bacteria we cultivate. The good bacteria which help us are nourished and cultivated by our eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Because those are the plant foods we eat. Researchers have found that a whole food vegan diet resulted in reduced intestinal inflammation, suggesting a promotion of healthy microbiome balance. On the contrary, an animal-based diet helped contribute to growth of disease-associated bacteria species, which are associated with inflammatory bowel disease and colon cancer. Okay, here's something, it's called we don't have to learn this long word, but it's there, TMAO. TMAO is produced by gut bacteria from choline, lecithin, and L-carnitine-rich foods, mainly fish, meat, eggs, and dairy. High levels of TMAO are associated with colon cancer, heart disease, atherosclerosis, and diabetes. So if you want to look at the Bible and you want to go back to Genesis 1:29, that was the first command given to man. He was told what to eat. And this is the diet he was telling them to eat. He was telling them to eat a plant-based diet. Now that's when everything was ideal. He told them to eat that. It was after things were not so ideal that he allowed them to start bringing some meat in, and that was after the flood, and I don't imagine there was much to eat right after the flood. So what they have found in science is that you can eat a small amount of meat, of animal products, and it has to be the grass-fed, it has to be the really clean stuff, but it's like, it used to be, they thought that it was 10 ounces a week, now it's down to 5 ounces a week, because they look and see what it's, what it's doing to the body. But, you can have your fish is very, and fish is very polluted. Fish is far more polluted than the chickens and the beef and the lamb and all that stuff. It's more polluted because our water is more polluted. Yeah. So every once in a while we'll eat some wild salmon. And another thing that's very interesting, people who have a lot of food sensitivities and maybe have histamine reactions, when they catch fish, they're doing these big nets and they're bringing the fish in and they throw them on ice and they keep them on ice for about 4 or 5 days until they go in and take them to the processing place. Well, during that time, bacteria grows. And so that bacteria can activate people who have histamine reactions and other reactions. So you have to think, go back to how people used to live. Catch the fish, eat it, you know. I mean, that was the way it used to be done. Or they did meat and they salted it so no bacteria could grow. So there are some places, it's expensive, where you can get fish, wild salmon and stuff that's been caught by line, and they process it and flash freeze it right there within 10 minutes. And so people who have these sensitivities and histamine reactions can eat that. Now, I'm not saying it's not polluted fish, because the water is polluted, so there may be some pollution to it, but if your liver's working well and you're detoxifying well, you can detoxify a lot of this stuff. But a lot of us are not detoxifying well, and there are genetic reasons that can be causing that, and there can be lifestyle reasons. Okay, so when we switch diets, for example, from the standard American diet, which is pretty horrible, to a whole food plant-based diet, many of the current bacteria will die and be replaced. So they're just going to die, and then the other bacteria come in and fill that spot. Remember I said it's all about real estate. So therefore, what we eat can be a matter of life and death for these little bacteria. Some studies have shown that they seem to be influencing their hosts, us, cravings, in order to survive. So they can actually, okay, when you want, let's say you're going to switch now to a plant-based diet. That bacteria is going, no, you can't do this. We need meat, we need cheese, we need this, we need this. And if you don't give it to them, they can influence your brain. They have so much influence on us. They can influence your brain and make you crave those things and want to go eat those things. They can make you even think about, like, justify it. Well, I need more protein. I know I need more protein. They can, I mean, it's amazing. There's a certain bacteria that gets into mice and cats, and it's a deadly bacteria. And so what it will do is that bacteria will get in the mouse, but the way it can spread is only through cats, through cat feces. So what it will do is it will make that mouse lose all inhibitions of the cat and run right up to the cat, and the cat will kill the mouse and get the disease. Yep. So these are, and so we have to work in community with these little things, because they're make up us, our bodies, and that's why I call this the Big Picture Health Series, because if there's so much more than just the diet. There's so much more than just exercise. There's just so, I mean, it's basically going back to the way we were designed. That's what it's all about, is getting back there as best you can. Okay, so getting started, okay, birth and infancy influences. So getting started with a healthy microbiome is crucial to our lifelong health. Our gut houses greater than 70% of the cells that make up our immune system are in the gut. If your gut's not working well, your immune system's not working well. That's just all there is to it. Our intestinal microbiome is a signaling center that assimilates and coordinates environmental inputs. So what you see in the environment, it's going to coordinate all that, such as diet with genetic and immune signals to influence our metabolism, immunity, and response to infection. Our protection against disease from mental illness and from colds to cancer relies on a healthy gut. So it's crucial that we get our guts working properly, and we can. C-sections. I'm a C-section baby, and believe me, I have been working. The reason I know all of this that I know, it started with my own health thing. In number one, I give my story about a horseback riding accident, but mine even went back earlier, but it really got bad after the accident. So the doctors, I went to the traditional medicine route, and nobody could help me. So then I found some doctors that were very progressive, and then nobody knew that the science wasn't there. So I had to just start researching myself. And so I stay on top of the science because I'm always looking for stuff to help me. And so what I've done is I've I share this information that I've learned, and I've learned from a lot of different scientists, a lot of different doctors, a lot of different people. I'm researching and studying all the time. Okay, and I love it too. I mean, I think it's my calling. So so C-sections account for greater than 30% of all the births in the United States. The baby's first exposure to microbes impacts his lifelong health. So what you were exposed to when you were born is impacting you right now in your health. Okay? When the baby travels through the mother's birth canal, he or she is coated with the mother's microbiome, which is in the birth canal. About a couple of weeks, or I think a week before the baby's born, she begins to build up all this microbiome. That's what just happens. It builds up in the birth canal and gets thick with this microbiome in preparation for the baby. And this microbiome is what's going to, mama's microbiome is what's going to protect that baby. So, however, babies born by C-section delivery are colonized by environmental bacteria present in the hospital. Doesn't sound very good. Which can include some pathogens, yeah. It is believed the difference in microbial exposure based on delivery method could have lifelong health impacts. And I can tell you it does. Additionally, breastfeeding is important for seeding the baby's microbiome, and snuggling up with mom during breastfeeding gives baby even more immune protective bacteria from her skin. C-section and bottle-fed babies are at an immune disadvantage from the get-go. They often suffer from ear infections and other illnesses, and what do they do for ear infections? When you go to the doctor, you have a baby with an ear infection, what does the doctor do? What?
She's talking about medicine. Oh, medicine. Do they give you an antibiotic?
Right. Amoxicillin. That pink one. It's pink in a bottle. My daughter lived on amoxicillin because I only breastfed her for 3 months. At least I did a natural delivery. And she lived on it until I found this Cherokee Indian herbalist guy, older guy, brilliant, and he fixed her a tea and got rid of it. It was amazing. So antibiotics are another serious microbiome balance upset. The antibiotic, antibiotic means it's against the bacteria. Antibiotic destroys not only bad bacteria, but our good bacteria as well. When the microbiome becomes unbalanced and compromised, and then after that, so it can wipe out your good bacteria, all the bacteria. And so then, remember, it's about real estate. Everybody's rushing in to take over that real estate. And who knows what you're being exposed to is going to rush in. So then what you can end up with certain bacterial strains like C. diff. You all know what C. diff is? C. diff is a horrible bacteria that a lot of people get in the hospitals. And it causes diarrhea. It can kill people. It causes diarrhea and just terrible, terrible GI issues. That just chronic diarrhea, it just ruins people's lives. And it's very hard to get rid of it. They do now have ways to get rid of it with what are called fecal transplants. And they take the fecal matter from a healthy person with a healthy GI tract. They've checked it, they've run tests on it, they've sterilized it and so forth. I mean, not completely sterilized it because you need that bacteria, but then they put that fecal matter from the healthy person into the person with C. diff, and there are many different ways they do it. They put them in capsules. They do it with colon things, but it'll repopulate the gut, and this they do in hospitals. I mean, this is mainstream medicine. It'll repopulate the gut, and that person will get over C. diff. You cannot get rid of C. diff with antibiotics. It just keeps coming back and keeps coming back and coming back. So this works really well. So when the microbiome becomes unbalanced and compromised, certain bacteria strains can overdevelop, contributing to many health disorders. And you have to think, people in the hospital are compromised. They're sick, or they wouldn't be in the hospital. Do you sleep very well in hospitals? You get very good, well, no. I mean, it's very stressful in a hospital. It's very stressful. Remember, stress compromises the immune system? So you're more susceptible to something like C. diff or MRSA or any of those things while you're in the hospital. And you've got all this bacteria in the hospital from sick people that are compromised.
But you get good food in the hospital.
Oh, right, yeah, uh-huh.
Which hospital did you go to?
Yeah. A compromised bacterial microbiome leaves a person more vulnerable to everything. There's currently, okay, this is interesting. There's currently promising research into the use of bacterial phages, that's what they're called, which are friendly to bacteria other than the target bacteria to replace antibiotics and for some infections. They were using phages in the early 1900s before they started using antibiotics. And phages are little viruses, but they're viruses that don't hurt you. And these, but you can target this type of phage will kill a E. coli bacteria. And so they go in, they give you these phages, and they'll go in, and the phage will go looking for E. coli bacteria, certain, because they're good E. coli bacteria and they're bad E. coli bacteria. So it's looking for this certain bad E. coli bacteria. And that little phage gets inside that bacteria and causes it to explode. And then when it explodes, that food is food for the good bacteria, the exploded bad E. coli. So they're working on developing some of these phages that will go to, so that phage will not touch any of your other bacteria. It's not even interested in anything else in your body but that one targeted bacteria, and it doesn't harm you in any way, or it doesn't harm your bacteria. So there's some really promising research on that. So you'll see in the future, you'll start hearing about these phages coming out. So microbiome imbalance. Okay, this is called dysbiosis. Is a condition caused by an overgrowth of certain bacteria causing microbiome imbalance. Has anybody heard of H. pylori? Okay. H. pylori, we all have H. pylori. We didn't all used to have H. pylori, but because now we're a globalized world, there was a reason that God separated. You remember the Tower of Babel? He separated the nations. There's a reason we were separated. There are spiritual reasons, and there are biological reasons. But man decided we need to do this globalization thing. And so now we have all kinds of things coming over to this country, and we're sending other things to other countries, and we're dependent on, everybody's dependent on each other. Well, the H. pylori is one of those lovely little bacteria that came from some other countries, some undeveloped countries. So now we have H. pylori, which lives in all of us, or most, they say about 50 to 70% of the population. And it can cause reflux, GERD symptoms, ulcers, and just cause you to feel bad. And some people don't really have any reaction to it, don't have any symptoms from it. And so they find that keeping the levels of H. pylori down at a certain lower level is fine. That's what they want to do, is bring it down. H. pylori is hard to treat with antibiotics because it becomes resistant very quickly to antibiotics. So the best way to treat H. pylori is with natural means, something called mastic gum and some different herbal stuff. And that's the most effective. So that's an example of a microbiome imbalance. But there can be a lot of them. And the imbalance may cause bloating, diarrhea, constipation, cramping, nausea, headache, GERD, anxiety, depression, fatigue, and other symptoms. And H. pylori can do all of that. I've had H. pylori, and I've been treated. I was treated with, because I also spent a lot, after I had my accident, I was in the hospital for a long time. So, I don't know the chicken before the egg. I don't know what came first or what caused what, or so forth. I just know that I ended up with a lot of bad stuff. So, yeah, I did a test. Yes, a stool test. There are different types of tests, and I've learned that there's acute H. pylori. That means you've all of a sudden got GERD, and you're really hurting, or a stomach ulcer, but you've never had this before, and now you've all of a sudden gotten it. That's acute. Chronic is I've had this for years, and I can't get rid of it. But I can kind of chew Tums or this, and it feels a little better, but I suffer and I don't sleep. That's chronic. There are certain tests that when you go to a GI doctor, they will do a breath test for H. pylori. The breath test will detect acute H. pylori, but it often doesn't detect chronic H. pylori, because H. pylori the longer it's in you, it builds this thing called a biofilm. And it's kind of, that plaque you get on your teeth when you brush your teeth, you can scrape it off, that kind of, well, that's what the bacteria build to live in. That's their home, and they'll build that in your body on the walls of like your stomach or wherever they are, their arteries, the plaque situation. And so the H. pylori is really good at that. It builds this biofilm, and it lives inside there and just eats away at your stomach, just it destroys and inflames your stomach or your esophagus and all this stuff. But because it's hidden behind that biofilm, the breath test doesn't detect it always. So for the H. pylori, when you have chronic H. pylori, you have to do a stool test. The stool test is more effective at detecting it. But not all doctors know all of this stuff, because doctors they're allowed in the system, in our healthcare system where you have insurance and so forth, those doctors are allowed no more than like 10 minutes with a patient. And they see patients all day long. I mean, one after the other, after the other. And then they have to do their charts. That means they've got to go over everything and organize everything, which they sometimes have to do into the evening. So, and they have a quota of so many patients they have to see, or they get penalized. It comes out of their money. Yes. So they are under an unbelievable amount of stress. So tell me, when do these doctors have time to research and keep up with the newest stuff, what's going on? And then tell me, who do you think educates the doctors after they're already doctors in medical practice? The pharmaceutical reps are the ones that educate them. They come in, they have a new drug, they want to promote, or they'll come in and they'll say, we've noticed that you haven't been writing any prescriptions for this drug. What's going on? So they're under a lot of pressure by the pharmaceutical reps and the pharmaceutical companies. So this is what's going on with doctors. So they're not getting to do all of the research to learn all these things about H. pylori and, this stuff that I'm telling you about, because of Mark, I have the time to research all of this, because Mark works and I research. So, anyway.
Do get a good education in the day seminars, and on the weekend it's live.
Oh yeah, Las Vegas.
Yes.
But who pays for those seminars? The pharmaceutical companies, because the pharmaceutical companies are going to be there talking about their newest products. Because the pharmaceutical companies do rule the world, especially in the United States. They rule our government. They're on top. They're the bosses. And big oil is on top of them, because big oil chemicals are made from big oil, and then from the chemicals are made the pharmaceuticals. So this is who runs our country, and they're all about the bottom line. Okay?
In charge and arm and leg.
That's right, of course, of course. So a growing body of research suggests that dysbiosis of the gut microbiota is also induced by environmental pollutants, such as pesticides and herbicides, especially glyphosate. Do you know about Roundup? Okay, glyphosate is what is in Roundup, and it's one of the most dangerous things you can be exposed to. Do you want to know why it's so dangerous? It doesn't really hurt you, but guess who it hurts? Your gut microbiome. It's patented as an antibiotic. It kills and damages your microbiome. And we've learned that our microbiome is what protects us. So they started really ramping up the use of glyphosate in, they use it for crops and to dry the wheat and dry the beans and dry the sunflower seeds, because they can get more, they can plant more crops when they can artificially dry things out. So they saturate your wheat with this stuff before you eat it. So in the 90s was when they really started using a lot of glyphosate. And that, if you look at graphs of autism, autoimmune diseases, cancer, all these things are going up on the graph, and the use of glyphosate is going up right along with them. So in the United States, it is legal to use as much glyphosate as you want.
They didn't stop making this stuff because of what it did to you.
No.
They just
No, the farmers, because, okay, here's how GMOs work. Glyphosate is the product that they created. It kills everything. You spray it out there, it'll kill everything. So what they did was they made crops. They genetically modified wheat and corn and different crops to be able to withstand glyphosate. So now you can go out there and you can hose those crops with glyphosate, and it doesn't kill them, but it'll kill all the weeds. So it saves them money. They don't have to worry about all the weeding and stuff. But the crop is now contaminated with glyphosate, which is going to damage and injure your gut. That's why it's so much better to eat organic. Now, the deal with organic, when you're eating organic wheat or you're eating organic corn or organic sunflower seeds, they're kind of all grown in the same area in some of your vegetables. They're kind of grown in the same area as commercial stuff. Some are grown farther away, but there's drift. So it blows the glyphosate to the organic stuff. But there's still not as much because it hasn't been hosed with it. It's just the drift has come onto it. So there's not as much glyphosate on the organic stuff. Okay?
The doctor told me that I have a condition, and it's like millions have it.
It's like what?
They're allergic to my body. I can't have wheat products.
Wheat products?
Yeah, I can't have wheat products.
Do you have celiac disease? Okay, then yeah, you can't get near it.
No, and
No.
I think that's probably the reason why. Is I never had that problem before until like the last 10 or 15 years.
That is why. It's the glyphosate which is causing a lot of this stuff. The celiac disease. Also, people cannot have celiac disease and be sensitive to wheat and sensitive to gluten. It's because your immune system, when it gets everything gets messed up. Think about it, it's coming in, it's killing a bunch of microbiome. You're getting a bunch of bad microbiome in there now, and your immune system's going, oh, this is terrible. So it goes, oh, okay, wheat. It's the wheat that's causing it. It's the wheat that's causing all this. So now you eat organic wheat or something that doesn't have any glyphosate on it or anything, but the immune system's going, no, it's wheat. It's already been trained and programmed to react to the wheat. So now you can't have wheat. Okay? So because your immune system can get confused by all of this stuff, and it can blame something else, the food, when it was really the pesticide on the food. And now it says, we will not be able to eat that anymore.
What about all the COVID stuff now that they've made, for the shots and things like that?
We're waiting. We're going to wait and see because it'll take probably about 2 years from the time they got these shots that we'll see. We're going to start seeing what this COVID vaccine is doing to people. We don't know yet. I mean, we're seeing a lot. There are a lot of deaths. There are a lot of injuries. Lots.
Saying that doesn't have anything to do with it.
Well, we know that it doesn't. The doctors that see them come in the emergency room know it does. But
Yeah, right.
but the children are starting now that they're starting to see. I've been tracking it, the VAERS, because it'll show every week what's been happening. So the kids are starting to die and get sick from these vaccines. And that gets into trauma, because I'm going to touch upon trauma at the end of this, because we are all traumatized by what's going on, and we've all been traumatized by what's been going on. So anyway, symptoms of poor gut health and a distressed microbiome. So here, this gives you some things you can wrap your mind around. Since your gut wall houses 70% of the cells that make up your immune system, some symptoms are often not associated with gut problems. For example, an aching body, lower backache, headaches, hives, GERD, sugar cravings, bad breath, foul-smelling flatulence, food allergies or sensitivities, moodiness, anxiety and depression, skin problems like eczema, diabetes, autoimmune disease, poor immunity leading to chronic illness, histamine reactions like itchy eyes and IBS symptoms, overreaction to insect bites, and overly attractive. Become overly attractive to biting insects. So people don't normally associate a lot of these things with their gut, but it has a lot to do with the gut. Because the gut is the immune system, 70% of the immune system. So the gut is a primary driver in our body, and then the nervous system plays into that too. It's a the brain and the gut. And actually, when the baby was forming in the womb, you know how the brain looks like that and how the gut looks like that? Well, they were made from the same tissue. So they also call the gut the second brain because it does have a brain. It does think and it does remember things. And so you've got a two-way street going, back and forth from the brain to the gut, and it travels on something called the vagus nerve. And so the gut communicates with the brain, and the brain communicates with the gut. You know how the Bible talks about the seat of the emotions are the bowels, and it's always talking about that stuff? Well, that's because it's true. So there's a constant two-way highway going from the gut to the brain. The gut says, oh, we're injured from this, and then the brain goes, oh no, nervous system, and then the brain sends something back to the gut and the back, and it's just going back and forth all the time. Okay, so we were designed to thrive and experience joy, but for many people, life is anything but. They can't even imagine a healthy, joyful life. Some people have felt bad all their lives, so they don't even know what feeling good feels like. In this Big Picture Health series, you are learning some tools which will help you thrive instead of just survive. And so they've gotten some tools. There are a lot more. For example, I did not know, I've been doing a program which I'm going to talk about here at the end called the 21-Day Journey to Calm Aliveness. A medical doctor out in California is doing it. I do it on the computer, on Zoom. And anyway, she's teaching us tools to calm our nervous system down so that you can feel relaxed. I've never felt that before in my life. I didn't know that because all I know was what I feel. And I had a difficult childhood and some difficult times, and then this accident and so forth. And then I had some physical problems. And so I've been doing some of these exercises, and I've relaxed, literally felt what it is. There are two different types of your nervous system. There's something called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is when you're relaxed. Sympathetic is when you have anxiety or you're agitated or hyped up, revved up. I have never in my whole life been out of the sympathetic nervous system. I've constantly had anxiety and a revved up nervous system. But it was normal to me. It's all I knew. So I've been doing the exercises, and all of a sudden it's like, I felt like I took tranquilizers. I said, this feels like almost being on drugs. And that's a normal, relaxed state. And many of us don't know what that feels like. Okay, so our second brain and the mind digestion connection. The brain has a direct effect on the stomach and vice versa through that vagus nerve that I mentioned. The vagus nerve is a superhighway to and from your brain, gut, and other organs. There's communication going all the time, saying produce this chemical to deal with this organ. Distressed intestines send signals via the vagus nerve to the brain, the same way a troubled brain sends signals to the GI tract. Okay, here's what happens. When you're stressed, and you may not even know you're stressed, but you have GI problems. When you're stressed or traumatized, been in the military, been in the war, whatever, the vagus nerve can slow down because remember I told you that when you have to get out of when you're in a threatened situation, you can't afford the energy going to your gut for digesting food and all that stuff and your brain for thinking. You can't afford it. You need it in your muscles. You need it back here in that primitive brain so you can make, just instinctual moves. So and the way that's done is the vagus nerve shuts it down. It switches it off. It says no more digestion, no more thinking right now. It just turns it all off. Just turns it off. So now you're not digesting your food. And so it should come back on. Like that deer, it should come back on and everything should start cranking up again and everything will be fine. But in the culture and the world we live in, it's kind of stays, it's not completely shut off, it's just kind of turned down. And so our organs are not doing what they need to be doing for us to thrive. So the vagus nerve then slows down and sometimes even shuts down digestive and cognitive functioning. Therefore, not only the brain can cause mental disruptions, but a person's upset GI tract can be the cause of mental anxiety, stress, or depression. The brain and the GI system are so interconnected that they could be referred to as one system. And keep in mind, they came from one. They were once one. The GI tract is often referred to as the second brain. It is controlled by the enteric nervous system, that's let's call it the ENT, which is a complex system of millions of nerves that watch over every aspect of digestion. Okay? The central nervous system, the CNS, communicates with and influences the ENS through pathways of nerves. The ENS is sometimes called the second brain. Remember, that's the one that watches over your digestive system. During development of a baby in the womb, that communication network system, which communicates and influences the one that watches over the GI tract, they develop from the same tissues. The ENS shares the same sensory and motor neurons as the brain. Neurons are nerve cells that carry messages between the brain to other parts of the body. The ENS even uses the same neurotransmitters, these are chemical messengers, as the brain. The ENS is found in the GI tract wall and carries on a dialogue with the brain during the entire digestive process. And you can read over this, you know, because I know it's hearing this for the first time, it's hard to grasp all this, but you can see the fearfully and wonderfully made business, can't you? Okay, the GI tract and the brain use the same neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin. Have you heard about dopamine or serotonin? Okay, well, I just told you about them in there too. And to transmit information back and forth. Okay, listen to this. Bacteria can produce compounds that have small enough particles to pass into the brain. This includes tyrosine and tryptophan, which are converted into dopamine and serotonin. That's happening in your digestive tract. Your digestive tract is making your serotonin and dopamine, a large portion of it, the majority of it. The bacteria then reward us with good feelings when we feed them well. So once you've cultivated the good bacteria, they're going to reward you. They especially desire food that makes it to the large intestine. That food would be plant foods. That's your fiber and stuff. Meat does not go to the large intestine because it's fiber-rich foods and things called resistant starch. That's what gets down into your colon. That's what feeds all those good bacteria that are down there. And that's where we have most of our bacteria is in our colon. They especially desire food. Okay, let's see. So I suffered my whole life from clinical depression. And I went on a whole food plant-based diet almost 20 years ago, and my depression stopped, and my migraine headaches stopped. I had horrible migraine headaches too. And I had to take hormones because I had had a hysterectomy. And I was able, after I'd been on the plant-based diet for a couple of years, I was able to even get off all my hormones. So, because the plant-based diet, you can just see all the stuff it does, all that's going on. It starts making everything work right. Okay, so mental and social factors influence the health of the GI tract. Stress, depression, and anxiety can affect the movement and contractions of the GI tract and cause inflammation. So those contractions, if you have constipation or you have slow transit time, if your food moves slowly through the GI tract, it can cause inflammation because that putrefying matter sits, doesn't move fast enough. To keep from getting colon cancer and those things, you need for the stuff to move quickly through the GI tract. Your transit time should be around 12 to 17 hours. And you can do it with a piece of corn, or you can eat beets, and you can kind of clock it and see how long it takes. It is even suggested that some people with GI orders experience pain more acutely because their brains do not properly regulate pain signals from the GI tract. Therapy and low levels of certain antidepressants, especially older tricyclic antidepressants such as amitriptyline, have been helpful in reducing GI tract disorders, including GERD and IBS. But these medications have serious side effects. Therefore, it is best to take the time and expense of working with a trauma specialist to address both the biological and psychological aspects of an overwhelmed nervous system. And then I give the name of this is the doctor I'm working with. She's the only one I know who knows all this stuff. But this, I took the amitriptyline for I think about 11 years. No, 7 years, 6.5 years. And I started getting tremors. And I had to go off of it. And it was not easy getting off of it. It took 4 months to get off of it. And it took, affected my sleep and everything going off of it. But I started getting tremors and nausea and things from it. It helped for the first 2 or 3 years. It helped my GI tract because, of course, it was helping dull my nervous system as well, because my nervous system was amped up. It got stuck in overdrive. I had a lot of issues in childhood, and then later in life I put myself in bad situations. And so my nervous system was, I had depression and I had a lot of these nervous disorders. But then I had a horse riding accident in 2002 where the horse reared up, came over backwards, and shattered my pelvis, crushed my abdomen. I had internal injuries. I had fractured sacrum, broken hip bones. I had 14 pelvic fractures. I was in the hospital for a while. I had a lot of transfusions and so forth. But after that, my nervous system was broken. That broke it. Before it was stressed, that broke it. And then my GI tract, everything went haywire. And so I've been at this I've been researching since about 2004 and have been finding answers and slowly getting better. We're now going into 2022. So we're looking at 20 years. But it's given me hope, and it's been a beautiful thing. And it's increased my faith and all that stuff. So I was just going through this today, learning this. There's something called the fight, flight, or freeze response. And the freeze response is where you get an emotional overwhelm on a cellular level. And the biology the biology gets affected by this. Because we talked about some of the ways. Remember, the vagus nerve turns off all the functioning and stuff, or turns it down. And when that goes on over time, over years, you can see how that's going to start to damage your organs. Your organs are going to begin to degenerate, and you're going to get and you get things like cancer and stuff like that. So a person can be living close to that line of overwhelm just from your life and just what you've been through. So certain people can handle more stress than others. Some people are just right there at the line of overwhelm, so the littlest bit of stress takes them over it. So here are some of the things that are behind that. Genetics, then we talked about epigenetics, life experiences, lifestyle that cause the imbalances, infections, and diet. So these are all your factors that you have to get under control. You can't change your genetics, but you can, because they have found that you can change your genetics if you can shift your thinking to where you have more joy and you perceive the world as a more of a beautiful place, because you can look upon the world and you can see it as a negative place, and you can see the beautiful nature and all that stuff, which is very important to do during this time that it is so difficult. So, and that's what this whole series is about. So anyway, this doctor, this Appian doctor, she is the only one I know that's put all this together, because psychology does not deal with biology, and biology is not dealing with psychology, and psychiatrists only deal with pharmaceuticals. So nobody's there. You've got this. This woman is so brilliant. unbelievable. And she's put all this together, and she has a program. She does these programs online on Zoom where she's actually there. And then she has coaches that she's trained that will do the blood work. You'll get your blood work done, and any kind of testing, genetic testing, all this stuff. And then you can take the courses. The first course you have to take is the one that I'm taking, the 21-day journey to calm aliveness. And that kind of, because that's going to, well, you're going to learn the tools to be able to bring your nervous system back to a comfortable place. There are all these tools that you learn. And so she teaches you the tools first so that when things do start coming up, because when you go into when you're in that sympathetic nervous system place of anxious and amped up, you are not wanting to look at certain things that are too painful that have happened in your life. And so you'll stay busy and, you know, all this amped up stuff. So you learn the tools first to prepare you so that you've got the tools to calm yourself down when things start to come up, because you're going to go out of that state. So anyway, it's a phenomenal thing, and I sent you can go to online. The 21-day journey is $500, but I mean, you know, this is cheap when it's something for the rest of your life. And the coaches, I think, charge $120 per session. And then, of course, you know, lab work, and some of the lab work's paid for by insurance. And so, yeah, they help you with all that. But this doctor's got it together. She was a general surgeon, and so she knows the whole body and all the organs really well. And she went into the trauma stuff because she was traumatized, but she saw this is where the problems lie. And so they deal with people with mostly people with chronic illnesses, everything from autoimmune to cancer to everything, because you've got to get to the core rather than just, you know, cutting it out, chemotherapying it, all this stuff. That's just surface stuff. You got to get to the core, what is causing all this stuff. And that's what she does. So that's what I do. I know this was a lot of information. It's time to stop because it gets to be overload. But that's why I give you these papers so that you can go over it and you can, you know, research anything, Google things.
Whenever you see anybody bring in, I'm making a point about how HEI, a gut problem, can attract vitamins, insects.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Well, you won't find.
I fight them.
They come out in the way of wasps and bees and mosquitoes and everything. And I'll be fine, you know.
No one got
They say, what I've read about it is that you produce more carbon dioxide, and that's what draws them. So this will give you hope. I was eaten alive by chiggers. Mark witnessed it. I at one point had like 70-something chigger bites on my back, and I love to be outdoors. I'm an outdoors person, and since this accident. So the chiggers they just ate me alive, and I would stay inflamed for about 10 days. It wasn't just, oh yeah, and it was just miserable.
How long ago was it? Was that a long time ago?
About 3 or 4 years ago. So then I went and started going to some functional medicine doctors and doing some treatments, and I can go outside. The chiggers don't bother me anymore. The bugs don't bother me anymore. And then I'm not even completely healed. I mean, I'm just getting, you know, I'm getting there. I'm much better. I'm so much better. So there is hope to get to the source of the problem.
Yeah, I thought it was because I got bit by a big old hornet. A big old hornet bit me on the foot, and I would have anniversary pain. And I had anniversary pain for like about 7 or 8 years now.
You probably have histamine reactions to it, and not histamine up here where you swell up in the face, but you have histamine reactions all over your body, and so.
It was, all I can say is that I got anniversary pain.
But it comes from the gut. It all comes from the gut.
I guess so, but I'm telling you, I got an anniversary pain in my foot where it stung me. That same every year, same spot.
But you can get rid of this stuff. I'm telling you, you can get rid of it. But like I've told you, it starts with the foundation is the diet. And the thing is, what I want to say is you don't want to do too much at one time, because that is a recipe for failure. We can't do that. because we've been in this way of life for our whole lives, generations even before us. So you have to do one thing at a time. So that's what I tell people, just start with the diet. Just start with the diet. Don't worry about exercise. Don't worry about anything else. Just start with the diet. Get comfortable with the diet, which takes some months, and to really transition to this way of eating, to be really comfortable with it, where you're no longer, you don't have all the temptations as much anymore. Your whole system has kind of adapted to it. It takes about a year. So you just start with the diet, and the diet is huge. The diet is huge. And then after you get that under your belt, then you go on to the next, and to the next, and to the next. But you can do certain things like the outdoors. You can go out and be in the sun. You can take a walk. I mean, you want to be easy on yourself. The key is being very kind, gentle, and easy on yourself. That is what's most important. And that's the opposite of what got us into the mess in the first place.
Being kind to yourself.
Yeah. We weren't kind to ourselves, and frustrated, stressed out parents weren't kind to us, when we had certain, needs, and teachers and bosses, and, the whole thing. It's just, one after another, after another, after another. So it's finally, we got to stop. And the only one who's going to stop it is us. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Very good.
I learned a lot today.
Good. Well, now I've got, and I always give my information on there, so you can always call